policy analyst at RBC. Very
with how they think the patient will react to the drug, but some of them have to do with the payer situation as well. So this is a drug that will be priced in the tens of thousands of dollars. So the reference prices we have are the TNF,
pricing,
which are in the high teens to low 20,000 per patient per year, and the MS drugs, which range from the low 30s up
future
to the 40s
revenues
per year. So when you get something like that, it's a buy and bill drug. So the doctor has to buy the drug and then infuse it and then get paid. Now they do make money when they make a profit when they get paid, as well as an infusion fee. However, there's a fairly significant outlay for any buy and bill drug for a rheumatologist. So inevitably, to start with, they will make sure that they're going to get paid before they put all of their patients that use a particular payer on that drug. So we would expect to start with that one patient would be infused that has a particular payer, and then the rheumatologist would make sure they get paid before they start infusing all of the patients on that particular payer. So the build of these products is very different from a small molecule. With a small molecule, you go out, you advertise it, it's sold through distributors, and so the uptake tends to be pretty significant with a new small molecule drug. With a biologic like this,
awareness,
we run a study of all of
how
the
medicine
comparable biologics,
will change.
and what's very consistent is the percentage of the first year sales in each quarter. Typically, the first quarter represents about 5% of the first year sales. The second quarter represents about 15%. The third quarter represents about 30%, and the fourth quarter represents the remaining 50%. So if we get approval in March and we launch Benlysta at the end of March, then we would have the first 3 of those 4 quarters this year, and then the fourth quarter of launch would be the first fiscal quarter of next year. So the ramp of a biologic is different than the ramp of a small molecule, and that's something that for other biologics hasn't been well understood by the street, and Claudine and I have been explaining that.
That's why StockMarketFunding.com has brought you the truth.
So then, what do you know, Claudine or Dave, what the consensus number is today on 2011 U.S. sales, and is that a reasonable number? How should I be modeling? If I look at my model, how should I be modeling that? And how are you guys modeling your thinking?
It's actually 85.
85 million now. Okay.
The consensus is 85 million. We don't have a view one way or another. We've not guided to the first year sales. And we haven't guided,
repeat, they have not guided numbers, but Wall Street will make one up and then make a bunch of catastrophe when they have not guided any actual financial numbers.
I've been in this business now for 17 years, and this is my 4th product that I've been the CFO of a company that's launched, and we have been orders of magnitude off on the first 3. So if we were to guide to first-year sales, I think that those of you that are the most intelligent fund managers would pay little attention to it anyway.
Sales.
So
that is reality.
That is factual. As Claudine says, is 85 million. I think we'll have a much better sense of how we're going to do this year once we get a couple of quarters into the drug. But unfortunately, that's going to be relatively close to the end of the year. So once we get a sense of where we'll be, we'll certainly guide. Certainly next year, I would expect that we're going to have a pretty good sense, and we'll be able to give some guidance to it. So all we've guided to this year is our overall cash balance at the end of the year.
Okay, so you don't think there would be any quarterly guidance this year?
I don't think that there will be quarterly revenue guidance this year. On the other hand, there are metrics that we are getting.
Okay. What will you disclose on a quarterly basis, or what will you guide us to?
We haven't decided what we're going to disclose, but we will figure that out a priori, and we will disclose the same thing every quarter. So we're not going to take, each of the, call it 15 statistics that we measure and take the best ones and give those to you each quarter. That would be somewhat disingenuous. We will figure out what we think are the most relevant data points, and those might include the number of requests for reimbursement, the number of patients infused, it depends on what data we can get that we think is reliable. But there clearly are data that are relevant before you get revenue data as to how the launch is going. And we're in the middle of figuring out what we're going to disclose on that, and we will certainly announce it.
Do you know if this product could be tracked by IMS?
It is very difficult for buy and bill products to be tracked by IMS because IMS's main contact tends to be the distributor, and so they, with the distributor, they can go in and do it. They may be tracking some aspects of this, but as I understand it, for biologics, the IMS tracking is fairly unreliable.
Okay. When you think about the first 1 or 2 quarters, I know you talked about buy and bill. Are there other things that I should be keeping in mind that could slow the launch, and what about the things that could be upside to the launch? You're out there talking to you can't make phone calls yet to promote the drug. It starts on March 11th, hopefully. But are these
March 11th would be a wonderful day for the people who suffer from lupus.
People ready to go between us and GSK. Okay. We have people who are actually GSK people who will be talking to payers. So as soon as this drug is approved, if it's approved, we will go out to payers and talk to them about the profile of Benlysta. And so we have a team of people who will work with the payers to ensure appropriate reimbursement for the product.
March 2nd, 2011, 8 days away.
And that is both people that talk to the physician about the drug, but also, very importantly, people who work with the back office on the reimbursement. So we're going to have a very good copay assistance program to make sure that no patient is turned down from Benlysta because of the copay. That's our intention.
That is very, very good.
To the extent that
people don't have to suffer
have a good copay assistance
treatment
program
because of lack of money.
And so we'll be doing a lot of work with the healthcare provider's office. And then with the patients themselves, we have the first website is up and running, which is called usinlupus.com.
Usinlupus.com.
Usinlupus.com. It's what we call our unbranded website. So we're clearly going to have websites to educate the lupus community. But I would say that the lupus community
just as we are educating you now in lupus.
If you have it, you learn a lot about it. And so I think that as you asked, there's a lot of anticipation in the patient and the physician community for this, for Benlysta, and in large part for their sakes, we certainly hope it gets approved.
Help me understand this dynamic, because when I go out and talk to community physicians and then as well as lupus experts, you think about the target market of your drug, which is the moderate to severe population. Aren't a lot of these patients treated at bigger centers as opposed to sort of community rheumatologist settings? And wouldn't those bigger lupus centers, A, have more financial resources to sort of deal with the buy and bill? 2, is it a little more concentrated at these centers? And 3 is that these lupus experts at these lupus centers are more educated about the disease, understand the drug, understand what it's good for, what it does do, what it doesn't do, and that could be a situation maybe that people aren't understanding.
Well, we sort of divide the world into
lack of education has created catastrophe in the Wall Street community because they're not educated.
And then the community rheumatologists who may have their own infusion capability, or they may send the patient out to an infusion center. We have a team of people, either us or GSK, that are addressing each of those 3. So in terms of the reimbursement, we're working to get everyone reimbursed as quickly as possible, and to make sure that there is appropriate reimbursement for the product, whether the patient is infused in a major hospital or in a community rheumatologist's office. So it's not a distinction we really have to make, because it's a relatively small number of physicians, and we're going to be going after everybody, and we're certainly going to be talking to the payers. So whether they're reimbursing a community rheumatologist or a major hospital should make very little difference.
Well, I just think sort of more the buy and bill situation. I mean, the community physicians, they're buying thousands and thousands of dollars of drug and storing it. That's a lot of money for them, whereas at a Hopkins or UCSF, they would have sort of the resources to buy a lot of drugs.
They certainly have more resources at the big ones, but they also need to make sure they're going to get paid.
Sure.
We do not expect there to be any significant inventory at the doctor's office. I mean, with a drug that's a buy and bill drug, typically they order it just in time. So they typically identify a patient, they order the drug just perhaps the day before it gets infused. So the inventory will be held primarily by us.
Okay. One last question on Europe. When would you expect a CHMP decision? When would you expect approval? And how should we think about that launch versus U.S.?
Well, as a matter of practice, we don't really get into the process before approval. We just sort of guide to approval, and our guidance to approval in Europe is the early part of the second half of this year.
Early part of second half.
The early part of the second half. Europe, alas, does not have an expedited approval system the way the U.S. does for lupus drugs. They do it differently. So we did not get expedited approval in Europe, but we do expect to hear back from them in the first part of the second half. The launch itself is going to be different. We are going to have reps in 3 countries in Europe, and GSK shares the cost of those reps. We share the cost of GSK's reps throughout Europe that are out selling Benlysta.
Okay.
So the pricing is likely to be lower in Europe.
How much lower?
Well, the TNFs are priced in the high teens.
Okay.
So they're priced relatively close to where they are in the U.S. The MS drugs are priced at a significant discount.
How much of a discount? Like 50%?
They tend to be in the low 20s.
Low 20s. Okay.
So
European pricing models are different than U.S. models. It is approaching the 6 o'clock hour, 25 minutes
quite significantly between
into the interview.
So,
and we'll have to cut it short in 3 minutes.
In Europe than it will in the U.S., but it's still worth us launching the product in Europe. I think this year Europe is not going to be a major factor in the overall financials of the drug, although next year we certainly hope it will be.
Okay. We got to cut it off for the time situation, but we're going to the breakout room. And thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us a good report, everyone.
This presentation has now finished. Please check back shortly for the archive. This presentation has now finished. Please check. This presentation has not yet begun. Please consult the schedule and press the play button at the start time. After the presentation, an archive will be available here. This presentation has not yet begun. Please consult the schedule and press the play button at the start time. After the presentation, an archive will be available here. This presentation has not yet begun. Please consult the schedule and press the play button at the start time. After the presentation, an archive will be available here.
You did. For good reason.
Okay, thank you. So we're this session 2 of the morning. Michael Yee, the biotechnology analyst at RBC. Very, very happy to have on stage with me Claudine Prowse, as well as David Southwell from Human Genome.
Thank you for having us, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are going to conclude the Human Genome Report. It's 27 minutes long. I have to get ready for pre-market, but one thing that we're going to conclude is that March 10th is forward-looking, 8 days away, and they talked about the administrations, they talked about funding, they talked about how they're going to report numbers when they can, what a launch would look like, and what the benefits are going to be when that launch is completed.